to another edition of Race to 2020, the exclusive Sky News Australia podcast. I'm here with Jack Houghton. I'm James Morrow, a host of Outsiders, opinion editor at the Daily Telegraph. Jack is with us today to talk about American politics. We've been away for a few weeks. I've been off in the U.S. on an urgent fact-finding mission. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And there's been so much happening with this race. The entire game has changed in the last 2 or 3 weeks since the last time we talked.
Yeah, well, the Democrats now, they're doubling down on this notion that they need to pull Donald Trump out of the office by force. And how do you think that's going to play out then? Well,
so just to backtrack here, the Democrats have now essentially forced Nancy Pelosi to go down the road of impeachment. This all stems from this conversation that Donald Trump had with Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of the Ukraine. And the question was, was he forcing or strong-arming Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden, and particularly Joe Biden's son, Hunter, who, for some reason, this guy, Hunter Biden, I don't know why anybody would think there was anything off-board about this because, he's just your average guy who'd been kicked out of the Navy for cocaine use and then winds up with a $50,000 a month position on the board of an oil and gas company doing business in the Ukraine. So, I don't know. Who knows? This is the sort of thing that happens to people every day. I don't know why anybody would be suspicious about that. Apparently, Donald Trump thought there might be some political hay in that. I don't know, but I think the really interesting thing here is we are now seeing how the Democrats are now in the position where they're saying that investigating potential corruption is actually proof of corruption because Donald Trump is evil and they've got to get him out somehow.
Yeah. It's the classic fallacy of consequence that if the allegation is a certain level of severity, then that proves that the allegation is correct.
Well, yeah,
and it's a false assertion.
Well, I think you're almost making sort of too much of a philosophical point about it, Jack. I mean, really, the real thing
that's
that
never been said.
No. I think the thing that really comes down for the Democrats is, hey, orange man bad.
Yes.
That is what they think, and so therefore anything that he touches,
they're very simplistic.
So they've launched this. So the interesting thing, though, is that they seem to be playing a playbook very similar to what happened with Brett Kavanaugh. And we all remember how that played out. So, you had this Christine Blasey Ford woman who got in touch with Dianne Feinstein, and then they worked together with sympathetic media outlets to create this whole narrative about Brett Kavanaugh being this horrible, abuser of women back in the past.
Yep.
Of course, it all fell apart, in Kavanaugh's on the Supreme Court, and Ford has gone back to obscurity. They seem to be doing the same thing here, but there's an interesting legal point about this. This whistleblower, who was a CIA agent, apparently, who also worked in the Obama White House and is said to be also a registered Democrat, for what that's worth, he said, or Adam Schiff, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, said, look, I had nothing to do with this. I didn't have anything to do with this complaint. I had no contact with the guy. My office had no contact with the guy. And then they've had to walk that back because there's proof that, in fact, Schiff had been in contact, or Schiff's office had been in contact with the guy. And one of the interesting things is that, on the declarations about the whistleblower report, it says, have you had any contact with, these other people? And they said no. So actually, it means that the whistleblower could have lied on his complaint. And a lot of people are thinking this all just feels much more like a stitch-up than it does a real concern about, the probity of the Oval Office. Was the Oval Office abused? One thing I will say, though, is that if you do listen to or read the transcript, which I've done a bunch of times trying to find this elusive quid pro quo that they keep talking about, you can't find it. The quid pro quo isn't there. But what you can find, and this is, I think, this is a really interesting point about Trump, and this is where Trump gets into trouble. Trump spent decades at the head of this, big real estate organization in New York, building casinos and hotels and office towers and things like that. And he did this, it was a private corporation, it wasn't publicly held, so, the level, he's not used to kind of having any bureaucratic oversight, and he's an operations guy. So for Trump, he does something that most presidents won't do. Most presidents keep the political stuff, out of the office.
Well, maybe, but how often is it leaked? I mean, when has this ever happened? These kind of conversations, the records are kept.
Yeah.
They're kept very carefully, and the original allegations. So I think we rewind this and we actually break it down for exactly what it was. The reports that initially came out were that he was promising to pull aid back if they didn't do this.
Yeah.
So it was predicated specifically on the aid to be pulled back.
And I'm glad, by the way, you mentioned withholding aid, because there's a tape of Joe Biden, and you can Google this and find it, it's all over the place, where Joe Biden, speaking to a Council of Foreign Relations conference, brags about the time that he said to the Ukrainian government under the previous president, if you don't fire your chief prosecutor, who, by the way, just happened to be looking into some of this corruption involving his son, who knows, then we will withhold aid. And then he said, well, I'm going to get back on the plane and go back to Washington without your aid. And he said, 6 hours later, they said the prosecutor was fired. So, so there you go. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, you were saying.
No, well, look, it's just interesting that the way that the media has handled this from the start to where we are now, the story has changed ever so slightly. So it started off being a very simple story that Donald Trump had called up the Ukraine president and said, if you don't investigate my political foe, then I'm going to pull funding back.
Yeah.
And that's how the front page was done up, and the journalists, it was framed in this light. Then the transcript came out, and then we know that, they talked a little bit about aid. They talked about it not directly related. He talked about aid a little bit further later, and they're like, see. But then it came out the whistleblower wasn't even there.
No, the whistleblower...
The whistleblower wasn't part of the conversation. He relied on third-party intelligence.
This is, so it's a whistleblower complaint made on hearsay, and then now they're trying to get this impeachment investigation off the ground. Now, the really interesting thing about this, too, and everybody should also understand this, this whole idea that this is an impeachment trial is nonsense. What we're going through right now, I call it a karaoke impeachment, okay? It's not a real impeachment. They are the Democrats, because they control the House. They are using their committee chairmanships to go on these fishing expeditions and send letters demanding things. If you actually had a vote on whether to impeach and hold that trial in the Senate, which is what impeachment actually is, Democrats would then be forced to declare their hands, including an awful lot of Democrats looking for re-election next year in seats that are very pro-Trump. So the politics of this are absolutely vexed for the Democrats, because they've got this far left that wants to just destroy Trump and get him out of the office. We are coming up on 1 year before the election. That's not a lot of time. So they're going to have this whole thing hanging over their head. Polls are indicating that people are nervous about this. A lot of Democrats are concerned about it, in terms of electoral strategy. And so they aren't doing the full impeachment trial, and they aren't subpoenaing people, because once you subpoena, then people can go to court and argue against the subpoenas and is this appropriate and so on and so forth. And they don't want to face, I think, that sort of scrutiny. So this is the thing with the impeachment thing. They're doing this ultimately, Jack, because they don't have another option in 2020. The 2020 race for them is shaping up to be a disaster.
Yeah, and look, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But my reading of this as well is Nancy Pelosi, for a very good reason, was fighting back against these calls to impeach Trump. For probably a lot better reasons than this is now shaped up to be. I think it's a massive misstep. And he's called their bluff, and he's released a transcript, and everyone's saying, that's not enough. I mean, for all the things that Donald Trump is alleged to have done and all of his indiscretions, is this going to be the thing that brings... No, it's not going to happen.
It's like, how many times we've been here before? Remember when everybody thought Stormy Daniels was going to be, the one...
So my only point with all this is that Nancy Pelosi looked at the polling, and I think for the Democrats it's purely a numbers game. And we still know that most Americans, I think it's something like 47% would like to see the impeachment process go through, to 53% who wouldn't. Yeah. That's still the majority of Australians don't like what's going on. Americans. And I would argue the majority of Australians.
Well, but actually, what they're doing is they're willing to tear apart the country. I mean, an impeachment trial, an impeachment drama, they're willing to tear the country apart rather than just simply do what the Constitution calls them to do, which is to just simply run a better candidate in 2020 and win on that. What they're doing, because they have been trying to impeach him in one way or the other, essentially almost since he began his candidacy. This is an ongoing effort. This has been going on really since 2015. And it has to be seen in that light, because they must expel Trump from the body politic. But what they're doing is a couple of things. They're delegitimizing democracy. Everybody says, Trump is so bad for democracy. Well, I think it's actually much worse when you do something like this, where you try to actively negate and nullify the election of 2016, which is what this is all about.
But that's what they're accusing him of doing.
Of course it is, but it's projection. But it's projection. Number two, what you're doing is that you will now, if the precedents are set by this, I mean, they're terrible. Number one, it will hugely restrict the ability of presidents to conduct foreign policy. Yep. Now that is, if you care about America, which they all profess to do, then they should not be setting a precedent where essentially the private phone calls between a U.S. president and heads of state, heads of government in other nations, can be just simply blown out of and onto the front pages. That is not the way to conduct diplomacy. That's not the way to conduct foreign policy. These things, everyone says, oh, well, he kept it on a secret server. Well, of course he kept it on a secret server.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not going to just upload it to his Gmail like Hillary Clinton would have done. I mean, that's nuts. Number two, though, what they're doing is they are also going to, I think, create a circumstance where where the United States moves into a nearly almost parliamentary type of system, because these impeachments will then become kind of de facto no confidence votes or confidence votes.
Sure.
And so it's going to assert that it's going to change the balance of power between the Congress and the White House in ways, again, completely unintended.
Yeah. What are the odds that all of the process are going to be wrapped up by the time they actually go to the polls? It's quite a lengthy.
They say they want to get this done quick. I mean, I've heard some say,
I'm sure they do.
But I mean, I think that panic shows that they have. I think they've gone well far out on a limb here, because Trump is now polling better than he's ever polled before, and they will.
And that's the
Democrats
only way.
will impeach their way into a second Trump term. That's all that's going to happen here. I mean, that's literally where this is going to go.
Yeah, look, I think that's the only thing that really matters, is how the American people are looking at this and what lens they're viewing it. And if his polling numbers are stronger than ever before, then we know that they've made a bad move.
And you have this sort of, it's almost like a Zeno's paradox, if we want to go back to Greek philosophy here.
Sure, please.
You've got this sort of situation where half the country thinks that Trump is utterly illegitimate, and they thought that he was illegitimate from the start, not on the basis of anything that he did, but from what he represented, which was an overturning of the kind of way business had been done in Washington, the whole sort of swamp thing. And then you've got the other half that simply doesn't care what Trump does, because he is going against that class of people, which he thinks, that political class, which they think is terrible for their interests. They're not wrong that class is terrible for their interests. That class has, over the last 20 years, pushed jobs overseas on the excuse of globalization. It's gotten the country involved in all sorts of disastrous foreign wars. It's lined its own pockets at the expense of everybody else, and that sort of cronyism that we see with Hunter Biden, that's exactly that sort of sweetheart deal that Trump is railing against. So
So can I ask one thing that I get a little bit confused about, is David Schiff and his commentary around the whistleblower, and did he lie or did he not? Do you know...
Schiff.
Adam Schiff, sorry.
Yeah.
Can you explain to me what the allegations are about him lying? Break it down.
So the allegations around the lying goes back to what we were talking about before.
Yep.
Was he in contact with Schiff's office beforehand? Did Schiff's office help him write the complaint? Right. So this whole thing has fallen apart because...
And this is the first whistleblower?
The first whistleblower. So the second whistleblower, we don't know who this is. We don't know what they're going to say. But it has all the feelings of them going, do-over! Like, we've got to sort of shuffle this one off to the side. Schiff has all but admitted that he has...
So it looks like he was coached by a political opponent of Donald Trump.
By Adam Schiff, who is the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, who is also one of the most virulent anti-Trump people on Capitol Hill. So it looks like a political setup, and I think people will see that for what it is.
So how is that not intrinsically worse than the actual original allegations that Trump...
Well, it's particularly because the allegations aren't in the transcript. So now you have all these sort of secondhand people coming out and saying, oh, well, I heard this and I heard that. And, well, come on, it's nonsense. Until you have a first-hand whistleblower, I mean, also, the other thing, too, like, this whole concept of this person being a whistleblower, well, I mean, like, this person,
It's treasonous.
well, possibly, but I mean, I think more of the point though is that this is this thing where a whistleblower generally puts themselves at great risk. This guy, if this succeeds, he'll be Mr. Book Deal's movie of the week. I mean,
Right.
it's like there's no small bit of imperative to be. I mean, we saw how James Comey tried to self-aggrandize himself, as if that's the guy who was fired from the FBI by Donald Trump and all of that. So there's all of that as well. But I think the thing with the Schiff thing is that it just shows that this is really a political thing, and it is not an investigation being conducted in good faith. That's why people are against impeachment, because it's not a good faith investigation. People do not have any sense that the Democrats are pushing this because they actually, want to get to the bottom of a potential ethics violation and a high crime and misdemeanor,
right.
which is how the Constitution puts it. It's never been formally defined, by the way, what that means. But that in fact this is entirely a political effort that is going to put the country through an immense amount of pain and wrenching political drama, all for their own personal reasons.
So were you coming back from America as this was all breaking, or did you spend any time on the ground and get to hear what people...
Yeah, so
where were you again?
Well, I was in New York most of the time, in upstate New York. So the sense on the ground that I got was that this will only harden people in whatever their position was going in.
Right.
So, which I think works to Trump's advantage, because we need to talk about what's happening with the other candidates, the other contenders.
Sure.
Because we've now seen, we've got another big debate coming up next week. We've seen the field of candidates winnowing, really. I mean, there's still tons of them out there. But really now, we're talking about Bernie Sanders. We're talking about
Elizabeth Warren.
And I mean, they're so inspiring, I can just, and we're talking about Joe Biden. And all three of them seem to be now so almost fatally flawed as candidates that the Democrats, I feel like, are going to have a really, really tough time getting through all of this.
Yeah, so it looks like Joe Biden still clearly is the front runner in some polls. I think Elizabeth Warren's up in Iowa.
Elizabeth Warren's up.
She's very close to him.
Yeah. Okay. So here's what's been happening. We had the last time we talked about Joe Biden was having all of those sort of strange memory fails. We had the fantastic incident while we were away of Joe Biden telling the story of Corn Pop, and I don't know if anybody heard the story of Corn Pop, but I think everybody should go listen to Joe Biden's story of Corn Pop, because it is absolutely hilarious. It's about the time when he was a lifeguard in Delaware, and he had to have a showdown with some young thugs who were led by a guy named Corn Pop. And it is one of the funniest things you've ever seen, and you'd be forgiven for thinking it was Grandpa Simpson telling his story of having a onion tied to his belt, because it was the fashion of the time. It was an Abe Simpson story deluxe.
But he's run into some health problems.
Well, no, Bernie Sanders is running. Bernie Sanders. He had a minor heart attack while he was on the trail. He's 78 years old. Never seemed to me to be the most physically vigorous guy, but I mean, he's 78, so what do you want from him? But he's had a couple of stents put in. I suspect that this will just the rigor of campaigning plus the demands of a potential Sanders presidency. I think that he will have to pull out, because if you're 78 and you've had heart trouble, it's just simply too much.
Yeah, and I think even if you are quite sensitive or you're a bit of a fan, there's still that underlying notion that
so
this guy
is
is not that healthy.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, and it's like we don't wish him any ill,
and also,
but
if he can't do the duties, then who's going to be the vice president? Well? I mean, are you really?
And I mean, it's like, look, there have been times when you've had presidents incapacitated. I mean, Woodrow Wilson had a stroke when he was president, and his wife was essentially regent who ran the country for the last few years of his presidency. I mean, you don't want something like that happening either again. But so I think that he is eventually out. The question is, where does his support go? I suspect that his support mostly goes to Elizabeth Warren, but some of it goes to probably people like Yang and interesting sort of people like that. The thing is that Warren, a couple of things about that. Warren and Sanders are kind of like two sides of a very similar coin. Warren is kind of the polished, educated version of Bernie Sanders. So that's why you get a lot of working class support for Sanders, but it'd be hard for some of that to translate to Warren. A lot of that will probably bleed back to Trump, because, of course, Trump's an outsider. One more point on this thing with the impeachment, though. with the impeachment, if they go down this road, they're going to allow Trump as an incumbent in the White House to run as an outsider, which is just an amazing thing to think about. So, but then now Warren, Warren's got her own troubles, and Warren, we remember that there was a whole issue about her DNA, and the 1/1024th of percent of Native American DNA,
which it was straight up a lie the way she
it was
presented
straight up a lie. Of course, it was straight up a lie.
And
she used it
as well.
She used it for gain, and I'm pretty sure that she used it to get her Harvard professorship because she made very clear, this is my heritage everywhere. So you don't think that was taken into account? Come on. But now there's another question. So then she claimed recently that she had been discriminated against and fired from a job as a teacher when she was younger, back in the 70s, as a public school teacher, because she was pregnant. And she said, oh, well, this is a sign of the invidious discrimination against women and pregnant women, and I've gone through all of this terrible stuff. Only the facts don't necessarily stack up with that, because there's been evidence now come out that of the meeting at which she tendered her resignation, that she was actually offered, continuation of her contract, and she rejected it and quit. And now she's saying, oh, well, it's actually there was subtle discrimination, which is, of course, like, well, I mean, fine, but and I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but it's like, honestly,
words matter.
Words matter, and so it would suggest to me that there's a real habit of embellishing her biography as a victim, because, of course, victimhood is currency on the left.
Oh, mate, gold, she's a straight-out liar. Look, the Native American DNA thing was so absurd, I can't believe that she managed to recover.
Of course it was absurd.
Be a candidate.
Well, so this is the really interesting thing, and this is what Trump has to watch out. I think that Warren is probably the most formidable candidate out there, because...
You say that.
No, I'm sorry. I know.
Say that every week.
I know. I think that she will be a tougher contender for Trump to beat than everybody thinks. I know that a lot of her ideas are bonkers. I think that she'll have a lot of trouble in the Midwest. That said, I think that of all the candidates, she seems to have, and I think the media is going to be right at her back on this. The wind is going to be right on her back from the press. They've decided that she's their candidate, so she's going to have that. They will cover up for absolutely everything, just as they tried to do for Hillary Clinton. And we've got a Hillary Clinton tweet, by the way.
Yeah. Now, just on that, before we get to that, I disagree.
Okay. Disagree.
So Elizabeth Warren, she is the culture wars,
Yeah.
If Trump makes this election about the culture wars and the Democrats saying ridiculous things, and Democrats making up stories about being discriminated about pregnancy and making up racially based lies and everything, Donald Trump is going to win, because the people looking at this are just saying, I can't possibly vote for this alternative. And even if Trump irks me a little bit, they need to go for a moderate and they need to go for Joe Biden, because it doesn't matter look, the media can back whoever they want. The media does not represent the voice of the people anymore.
The American people have rejected Joe Biden for president so many times. I mean, and not even Barack Obama has endorsed him.
But it's time and place.
So
just what happened? We're in a different landscape.
If
Elizabeth Warren comes up against Trump with this, the identity politics, and she doubles down and all this stuff, and she swings so far to the left.
But Jack,
they will lose.
If she presents as a candidate of calmness and normalcy.
But she's not.
I know, but if she presents that way, and Trump is the chaotic candidate, because you never know what he's going to do next, there are going to be a certain number of Americans who are going to vote
that she seems to be
and yet
chaotic.
She presents very calmly, very smoothly. She is going to be formidable.
She's talking about starting up like a multi-trillion-dollar fund that other nations that are poor can tap into to fight climate change. She's as radical and chaotic as they come.
Of course. Now the big
look. I think you're right in that the media will back her.
Absolutely,
the media like her story, but they like her story because she symbolizes everything that they want in terms of the narrative.
But none of that stuff about her policies is going to matter if the money doesn't flow. And Wall Street is already indicating that a Warren nominee would not get money out of their coffers, and they donate a lot to the Democrats. And we've also got people like Mark Zuckerberg on tape saying that Warren is would be terrible for Silicon Valley. So the Democrats, so where all that money goes,
that's disturbing.
That is disturbing. I mean, God, can you imagine we're on the same side as Mark Zuckerberg? I feel a little dirty, Jack. But so that said though, this is why I keep saying this, but I feel like out there there's somebody who's maybe registering, Hillary 2020 websites. They might be in a basement in Chappaqua. They might be getting the P.O. box sorted out. Donald Trump today tweeted 8 hours ago. He said, "I think that crooked Hillary Clinton should enter the race to try and steal it away from uber-left Elizabeth Warren. Only one condition. The crooked one must explain all of her high crimes and misdemeanors, including how and why she deleted 33,000 emails after getting a C subpoena." Now, Hillary Clinton tweets back, "Don't tempt me. Do your job."
She wants it so bad.
She wants it. You can tell there's been all of these rumors floating out there. Clearly her people are pushing this idea because,
How
if
good's
you're
the
right...
name, the crooked one?
The crooked one is going to come back, and it's going to be the standout of the century.
it's good, but so they could literally relitigate the entire 2016 race in 2020. I'm holding out for that. I actually do think there's a very good chance that could happen because, as you say...
Well, what's the deadline for registering as a...
It's a while off. Right. I mean, they still got to have the conventions. They've said, she could also run as an independent. There's any number of things that she can do. She's got a whole organization that's just sort of sitting on a shelf that she could turn a key and start up again.
Yeah. So, look, one of the things, I don't want to spend too much time on the impeachment stuff. I think we've been quite thorough on it. But one of the things that doesn't make sense to me is that this looks really bad for Joe Biden. The way this plays out, it doesn't necessarily help him. So I do think there are forces there within the party which are fighting against him. I think the same forces who were trying to get Nancy Pelosi to impeach Trump are the same people that
because Joe Biden...
They're clearing him out of the way. They clear Trump and Biden out of the way, and they get the radical leftists.
And that's the thing. Joe Biden is yesterday's news. Now, I still maintain that had Joe Biden run in 2016... he would have won because, I think everyone would have seen him as just sort of calm, avuncular uncle figure who could have just kind of calmed America down for 4 years, and then we would reset the clock after that. But now he's old, he's addled, he is so, the stuff that he says is pretty centrist. Now, I mean, to you and me, you're like, well, what's wrong with a centrist Democrat? A centrist Democrat's a good thing. But the way the party has gone and the way it's been taken over by these sort of woke progressives is that, things that Bill Clinton or Barack Obama would have said as recently as their presidencies would be today considered, utterly racist, xenophobic, sexist, horrible,
but
blah,
if
blah,
you
blah.
talk to the average person, this stuff doesn't bother. What happens?
No, of course not.
The Democratic base loves
this. So
but
they run
to
the
win,
far
they
left
need,
candidates. And we've been this.
I think this is our biggest point of disagreement.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's so the Democrats have run very far left candidates before. Your Adlai Stevensons, people like that in the past, and it's wound up being a disaster for them. I just wonder if the map is now so changed, and this is why I just think that Warren.
Look, it will be more fun with Warren. It'll be more fun because they will pull each other.
Absolutely,
the polarization will be off the chart.
Yeah.
But I think that their best bet has to be to get someone who's just normal, and then if they make it about.
So are you saying Hillary Clinton is normal?
No, not at all.
So you think they should go with Biden?
I think that their best bet would be Biden, out of everyone they've got there.
Biden going to get up on the stump and he's going to forget what city he's in and tell stories about corn pop.
But he doesn't need to. So he doesn't need to make it about that. He just needs to come up with some sensible economic things that aren't like, we're going to take all your money and create a Green New Deal and eat babies and throw it over here. If he doesn't do that, Donald Trump will get up there. He'll say weird stuff. He'll start riffing. He'll go off script. Donald Trump will lose his own race. And this is what Hillary Clinton didn't do well. She bought too much into it. She swung too far to the left, and then she made it about identity politics. I think if they do that again, they're going to get the same result.
Yeah, well, if it's a referendum on identity politics, hopefully, God willing, they lose.
Yeah, so, she was also quite a horrible candidate.
Well, she was a terrible candidate. She was dislikable. She was, her record at the State Department, I think, should disqualify her from watering your plants when you go away for the weekend. Seriously, what she did when she was at State was horrifying. Not just in terms of policy, but the way she basically turned the State Department into a shop front for the Clinton Foundation. I mean, it was just appalling. But anyway.
But she just looks corrupt as well. The way that she kind of handles herself, the way that she answered questions about Benghazi, the way that she handles the email thing.
Very shifty.
It's just like,
everything. She's very shifty, everything.
Do you think Joe Biden would have beaten Trump?
Yeah, I do think in 2016. Yeah. I think Joe Biden would have beaten Trump.
Surely you agree with me that he's the best.
I think he's too old. I think he's too sleepy. I think the time has changed. That wine would have been great uncorked in 2016. That wine now is vinegar. Anyway, that's all the time we've got time for today. We'll be back next week, same time, same station, for another edition of Race to 2020. Thank you so much, Jack Houghton. Great to be back.
Thanks for coming.
All right.